Aha. Well, I must have fumbled with it when I got the thumb drive out. All right, I'll keep my hands out of the pocket. All right. Okay, so let's see if it'll advance. Is this thing having on too? When all else fails, turn the switch on. Okay, not advancing. All right. Okay, there we go. Wow, success. Okay, if you get nothing else out of my message tonight, I want you to hear these wonderful words. Dagahan salamat. That's Cebuano, the language people where we work, for thank you very much. Thank you very much for your support, for helping us in this work. Thank you for your prayers and the encouragement that you gave. Brother Marvin, I understand he's not here tonight, but Brother Marvin wrote me a very, very encouraging email inviting me to come, and I appreciate that. This is the first time I've been here. My good buddy Roy is back there, and he's the one who set this up. He's our stateside fundraiser, and so I think a lot of you guys know him. But anyway, if you get nothing else out of this, I want you to hear the words, thank you very much. And so, as I said, we work in the Republic of the Philippines. You'd be surprised, many places I go to, how few of the brethren know where the Philippines are. And there it is. We're neighbors to Vietnam, to the west, as you can see, Indonesia to the south. We operate a Christian college. I believe right now, if I'm correct, we are the largest Christian college in all of Asia associated with Churches of Christ. You know, Asia is a pretty big place. I don't know if you guys knew that, but I don't know of any single Christian college associated with our great brotherhood who has the number of students that we have, the number of graduates that we have. We've just been around since 2007, or actually 2006. We've graduated so far 129 students. Our curriculum is very, very intense. I have a master's degree in Bible from Frieda Hardeman University. And I'm going to tell you that the courses that we teach at our school, the bachelor's level, are more intense than what I had to take in my master's level. But we supply everything for our students. They don't pay us any tuition, no fees of any type. We even give them 3 meals a day, 7 days a week. We even supply them with a small allowance. From time to time, we even buy their shampoo and soap and toothpaste. And for some of the college boys, you know, you want to do that. Trust me, you want to do that. It took me about a year to figure it out. What is that? No, I digress. So we first started on the island of Leyte, which is the 5th largest of all of the islands in the Philippines. The Philippines is an archipelago. If you don't know that word, it just means a group of islands. There are more than 7,000 islands in the Philippines. Only about 100 of them are inhabited. I met a Canadian guy over there in the 90s who told me that a buddy of his bought an island for a box of cigars. You can believe that. A box of cigars. And I asked him, I said, well, how big is the island? And he kind of chuckled a little bit and he said, well, he built a small house on there, 1 bedroom, and it took up almost all of the land. But we began this work on the island of Leyte, as I said, the 5th largest island in the archipelago. We've since branched out. We have 2 campuses. We have another campus on the island of Cebu, right in the heart and the center of the nation. And so we have students from all over attending there. I'm going to show you some pictures of just some of the daily activities in campus life. Our motto there, of course, training men for the greatest work. You will also notice that we have young lady students. Our first year, we had only men, but in 2008, we started inviting women to come. Now, don't get the wrong idea. We're not training women preachers. Don't believe in that, but there's one incredible thing about the Philippines that I want to share with you. I think it's incredible. You will too. Guess what? In the Philippines, in the public school system, from grade 1 to grade 12, all Filipino students take a Bible course. Can you believe that? Isn't that amazing? Grades 1 to 12. Now, they don't call it Bible. They call it ethics or values, something like that, because they don't want to offend the poor little Muslims. You know, we feel sorry for those poor little Muslims, don't we? But anyway, one Department of Education official told me personally, he said, we demand that the Bible be taught in those classes. Now, the Philippines is about 80% Roman Catholic, so they get a distorted, version of the Bible, of the gospel. But we're trying to set that straight. And our young ladies, when they finish our bachelor's degree, they can go into those classrooms and teach. And hopefully, we've had several ladies do that. And hopefully, they're teaching the true gospel. And so you've seen some of the slides here, some of the pictures. Picture paints 1,000 words of campus life there. There's our last graduating ceremony, April of 2019. We were not allowed to hold one last year because of the COVID-19, but there's a picture of our second campus, what we call the satellite campus. It's on the island of Cebu, one of the most heavily populated islands. And of course, as I told you, we don't charge them anything, any tuition, any fees of any kind. We give them free food, 3 meals a day, 7 days a week. And in return, we ask them that they assist us in evangelism. So at noon on Friday, or actually 11 o'clock Friday morning, we end all classes. And the rest of Friday and all day Saturday is devoted to evangelism. And one reason why that I'm in the Philippines is because of the receptivity of the Filipino people. These are people who are really hungry for God's Word. I've lived and worked in the Philippines now for 25 years. I've never met a Filipino atheist. I think such a person exists, but I've never met one. As I said, Roman Catholicism is heavily entrenched over there. But anyway, God has given us a lot of successes in this work, and I just want to put a few of these pictures up. Since 2007, we have had more than 2,300 baptisms. We've planted about 35 New Testament churches over there. And I'm not saying this to boast or brag by any means, because it's not due to me. Sometimes I think it's in spite of me. We just have a wonderful team, and we have a great field over there that's wide into the harvest, and we have an awesome God and a wonderful gospel that allows us to be saved. So, just wanted to put a few of these pictures up there showing you many of these baptisms, and you're going to see pictures of the congregations that meet over there. Many of them are what we call house churches. And you know what a house church is, right? It's a church that meets in a house. Very simple. Really, in the New Testament, you can't find a church building. So, we're just going in the New Testament pattern as much as possible. And we demand of our students, I started to say we ask. No, we don't ask. We demand of them that education that we're giving them and feeding them, giving them free room and board, we demand that they assist us in evangelism. And so that's what's happened in the 14 years since 2007. God has really, really blessed us with just tremendous success, and all glory to God, of course. That's the most important thing I could say about that. But anyway, it's a joy working with these good young people, and just seeing them grow spiritually. And so many of them, when they first come to us, I'm reminded of the old Babylonian king, in Daniel 5, when the handwriting was on the wall, and the Bible says that his knees smote one against the other, King James Version. Well, that's how some of our boys are when they first come to us. We ask them to take a preaching class in their freshman year, and their knees smote one to another. But by the time they graduate, they are really fine preachers. And 2,300 baptisms that I mentioned for our team, that does not include the baptisms that those who've graduated and gone out into their own works. Because I have no idea how many, that it would be nearly impossible to, more than 100 of them. It would be nearly impossible to keep up with them all and what they're doing. So anyway, that's what we've been doing since 2007, really, January of 2007. Until, of course, last year, the pandemic came along, and this changed everything. And, you know, it's hard for me to talk about it because I lost my dad to COVID just a couple of months ago. But it's really, really changed our world. I'm just going to show you a few pictures of what's happening in the Philippines right now as we speak. They have, some news organizations have stated that the Philippines has the most strict lockdown in all of the world. And I believe it because we experienced it. We were over there when it hit. We didn't get to come home until the end of April, and we could hardly leave our house. I mean, hardly even step out on the porch. That's how. And you can see what happens. You go outside without a mask, or you violate curfew, or you try to go somewhere you're not supposed to do. At first, they were putting people in jail. And, of course, the jails overflowed. And what happened? Well, they put them in the local basketball courts. The Filipinos love basketball so much. Every little town has a basketball court. And so, you know, they'll put them there or set them out in the hot sun. You got to sit out there for 5 hours. And look at this one. Conjures up pictures of our thoughts about the Middle Ages, doesn't it? Putting people in stocks. Well, that's the situation over there right now. And I suppose that's one reason why their numbers are a lot lower than ours. I think there's many factors involved there. But we experienced this strict lockdown too when we were trying to leave, and it took us about a month to be able to leave because the government said, all foreigners out, get out now. Well, you can't get out because there's no flights. And the few flights that you can, or that they do have, you can't get on them. Well, eventually, God is good. We were able to get out. But we were hearing that anytime you entered the city, you had to undergo this. In fact, a truck driver or delivery driver brought things to our campus one day, and I asked him, is it true that they're spraying you down with antiseptic when you enter the city? And he said, yes, sir. You see that shirt draped over my door? That's the shirt I wear when they're hosing me down. Oh, but luckily they ended that before we got out. And I'll just show you some pictures of some of the checkpoints that we had to go through. Driving from our house to the airport, about a 3-hour drive, we had to go through about 25 checkpoints. Soldiers with automatic rifles. And every checkpoint was different. Some of them they just wave you through. Some of them they stop you, look at your passport, your documents. Some of them they take your picture. Some of them they give you the 20 questions drill. But anyway, we got out at the end of April. This is a major highway in Cebu City. Anytime, night or day, that highway is bumper to bumper. But that was the situation at the end of April last year. We're still not allowed to enter the Philippines at this time. It's still locked down pretty severe. That's us as we were trying to get out. There's our flight attendants covered from head to toe. You know, this is a serious thing, of course, but I just put all these up there just to show you how much this has impacted our work. That's O'Hare International Airport in Chicago when we went through there. Ours was the only flight in about a 6-hour time period. We were the only ones. Can you imagine? It's different now, but we're still not, as I said, we're still not allowed to go into the Philippines at this time. No foreigners are, not even diplomats. They've locked it down even tighter. And so one of the major things that this pandemic has caused is a lot of jobs have been lost. More than 10 million Filipinos have lost their jobs due to the pandemic. The population of the Philippines is about 100 million, so that's 10% of their population just in this last year. And it was already a very, very poor country. And here's a chart of unemployment, joblessness, going back all the way to 1992, almost a 30-year time period. And you can see that in the 90s it was hovering around 10%, and then the economic troubles that we had in the early 2000s, it went up higher. But in 2016, they elected a president who was very good at economic things. And so, the unemployment rate started going down. But look at it right now. Of course, this was last July. 45%. 45% unemployment. And as I said, this is a country that's already poor, already considered a third world country. This is because tourism is their number one industry and has been for at least 3 decades. Number one industry is tourism. That they have some of the greatest beaches in the world, some of the greatest fishing. I'm not a fisherman, but people travel the other side of the world just to go fishing over there. But all that's gone now. And so every day since we've been home, nearly 11 months, every day myself or one of our teammates gets a request for help from some family or some preacher who's got families in his congregation who don't have anything. They don't have jobs. They can't feed their family. Every day we get requests. And so what we've done is just try to start a feeding program. And that's some of these pictures I'm going to show you, what we've been about in the last 9 or 10 months. It took me a couple months to get this started. But since June of last year, our organization has given away about 130 tons of rice. I didn't say pounds. I said tons, 130 pounds of rice. Filipinos are in love with rice. They are absolutely in love with rice. Every year, the opening of the school year, I have to give the speech. You need to eat your veggies. And so we buy vegetables for them to eat along with their rice and their chicken. But after a couple of weeks, the cooks come to me and they say, Brother Johnny, they're throwing away their veggies. I say, okay, fine, just give them what they want. Rice, morning, noon, and night, 3 meals a day. That's, little bit of meat, maybe some noodles, maybe some veggies, but maybe some eggs, but mostly rice. And so 130 tons of rice we've given away. And there you see some of our kids, some of our students, some other places where preachers and their families are putting together these little plastic bags. And each one of these, we've decided that the best way to do it, put about 7 or 8 pounds of rice in there, along with some cans of vegetables, but also meat. Filipinos think canned meat is the greatest. I'll tell you a story about many years ago in the 90s when I was invited to lunch at one of the brethren's house. I went over there and his wife is preparing this beautiful meal, this wonderful barbecued chicken, whole chicken barbecued on the grill, and there's some fried rice with it. I'm telling you, my mouth was literally watering. It was so good to look at. But then they said, Brother Johnny, we're so sorry that we did not get into town to buy a can of Spam. I assured them that this barbecue chicken would be just fine. Now, nothing against Spam. I can eat it, but it's not one of my favorites. But now, barbecue chicken. Right, brother? Preach the word and eat the bird. But anyway, canned meat. Oh, they just love it. And so, every grocery store, there's an entire aisle, both sides, dedicated to nothing but canned meat. They just love it. And so we buy some of the canned meat, put 4 or 5 of those in there, along with some noodles, maybe a dozen eggs or so, and we deliver these baskets of food, generally go door to door. And like this young lady, she was just there at the truck when the truck was going by, and our guys just gave her a bag. Galatians chapter 6, verse 10, Paul says, do good unto all men, especially they of the household of faith. And so we try to feed the brethren first, but I tell them, feed your neighbors too. And so they go door to door and just deliver these. And we've been doing that since June of last year. That's one of the things that's keeping our guys very, very busy. And I believe that this is a godly thing. I believe this is a God thing, as some of the young people like to say. We've always had in our brotherhood what we call it comes from Walter Scott, one of the pioneer preachers, and Jason probably knows who I'm talking about, but he pioneered it. He said he called it his 5-finger exercise. And it was, you must hear the word, you must believe, you must repent, right? What's the others? Confess, and what's the last one? Be baptized, of course. Now these aren't optional, right? God has commanded these. But I'm going to tell you, there's another 5-step plan of salvation that sometimes we ignore. In Matthew chapter 25, beginning at verse 31, Jesus talked about his return. And the king returns, and the king being himself. Along with his holy angels, he said he's going to separate the nations as a shepherd separates the sheep from the goats. And he'll say to those on his right, "Come, you who are blessed of my Father, inherit the kingdom prepared for you from the foundation of the world." Why, Lord? Because, you remember? You heard, you believed, you repented. No, I was hungry, and you fed me. I was thirsty, you gave me drink. I was naked, you clothed me. I was sick in prison, and you visited me. Okay, there's 5 there. Sometimes we ignore that, all right? But as this beautiful verse says, whoever despises his neighbor is a sinner, but blessed is the one who is generous to the poor. So that's what we're about right now. I can't be over there physically, but this is one thing that we're about. We're asking our Bible instructors and our students. Many of our students never went home because going home meant going to a place where mom and daddy can't buy food. And I made the decision at the very beginning, we're going to keep giving you food as long as you stay here and help us with evangelism. And so most of them stayed. And so what they're doing is they're being generous to the poor, okay? And to be quite honest with you, that's one reason why I'm here tonight. I'm here to ask for your help. I know that there are many different works that you could give to. I know there are probably people in this very community who don't know where their next meal is coming from. But I'm going to tell you there are multiplied millions of them like that in the Philippines. There are people right now as we speak starving in the Philippines because of this terrible pandemic. And so we want to try to do something about it. Isaiah 58 verse 10, if you pour out yourself to the hungry, satisfy the desires of the needy, then shall your light arise out of darkness, and your hope will become as the noonday. 1 John 2, you know this one, verse 17 and 18, whoever has this world's goods and sees his brother in need, and yet closes up his heart to him, how does the love of God dwell in him? That's a rhetorical question, isn't it? The answer is it doesn't. It doesn't. Little children, let us not love in word or in tongue, but in deed and in truth. And then we have, the James chapter 2 passage. If a brother or sister is poorly clothed, lacking in daily food, and one of you says to him, go in peace, be warmed and filled. I hope you get some food, brother. Good luck on your journey. And yet, does not give them those things that are needed. What good is it? Another rhetorical question. It's not doing any good. It's not doing any good. So also faith, by itself, you see that? By itself, if it does not have works, is dead. There's another one. We'll just go ahead. Okay, I love this saying by Buzz Aldrin, second guy to walk on the moon. If we can conquer outer space, we ought to be able to conquer hunger. I think that's so true. Another thing that I'm doing here in the States, for lack of a better term, I'm not a very creative guy, I admit it. I'm not an artist. I'm not a good writer. For lack of a better term, we just call it a shipping ministry. And what that is we just send things that items that congregations like you may not be using anymore that you could share with your brothers and sisters over there. I'm talking primarily about, we've sent 70 boxes just since June. I'm talking about primarily songbooks. Well, I see what you meant by this clicker. Okay. I'm talking about primarily songbooks, Bibles, Bible class materials, communion supplies. And I tell you, I'm a slow learner. It took me a few years before I finally figured out. One day I was in one of these small house churches, and there was about 25 of us. And communion, a little guy with a little old piece of plywood and about 8 communion cups. And another guy was following him with a bottle of grape juice, refilling And I said to myself, that wasn't the first time. I said to myself, I can do something about that. So I came home, talked to my friend Loy at the Louisville church. He was the head of mission committee. And that's a big church, about 1,000 members. and they help out in the work. I said, Loy, how many communion cups do you guys throw away every Sunday? He said, I think it's about 1,000, 1,100 maybe. I said, can I have those used ones? And he said, what do you mean? And I said, I explained the situation to him. You can't buy these things over there. And he said, well, I don't see any problem with that. He said, but let me run it by the elders first. And so he called me about 3 or 4 days later, and he said, well, I've got good news and bad news for you. And I said, bad news? I don't want any bad news. Don't call me with bad news, brother. He said, well, yeah, the bad news is the elders said you cannot have our used communion cups. I said, I can't have your garbage? I said, you do realize I could show up there at 7 o'clock Monday morning and go through your dumpster? And he said, well, Johnny, you haven't heard the good news yet. I said, well, tell me the good news. He said, the elders agreed to buy you 2 cases of communion cups, brand new, 10,000. Okay. They have since bought 6 more cases. That was about 4 years ago. Okay. So we supply communion cups all over to different churches. I said 70 this past year, but we've done about 200. That we've been at this about 4 years. So if you folks have communion cups, used is fine. If you have Bibles, songbooks, you can't buy these things in the Philippines. Or any kind of Bible class material that you're not using, we'll sure take it off your hands. We've got an empty trunk. Okay, so that's one thing that we're about. Got some pictures here of some of the congregations that we've sent these boxes to. The box stands about this high, and it's this wide. $120. $120. Dave, who's the Filipino guy in charge of this, lives in Rowlett. He comes to the church and picks these up. Next time we see him, it's at the door in the Philippines. $120 door to door. And I said, what? Is there any weight limit? He said, no. He said, you can put bricks in there if you want to. I assured him I didn't want to ship bricks to the Philippines, but we have shipped some boxes over there. It has 30 songbooks and 30 Bibles. You can imagine. He comes to pick that up by himself. You can imagine the trouble he had getting that into his truck. But no, I help him. Sometimes I help him. Anyway, we've supplied nearly 200 congregations with items like this. And those are just some pictures of some of the churches that have received them. And they are so grateful. Some of them said, we opened this box and there were tears in all of our eyes because of that. And these are some songbooks that a church donated to, bought us about 1,200 songbooks. That's been about 3 years ago. And we have a group of ladies in West Texas who put together Bible class material. They even laminate it and laminate the envelopes they go in. Wow. And there's pictures of some of those children's Bible class and so materials. And so we just gather all these up, pack them in one of these boxes. They're called balik bayan. That just means returning home. There's communion cups. We also send trays when we have them. If you've got old communion trays laying around. And there's my buddy Dave. Like I said, he lives in Rowlett. He runs this business out of his garage. But we've shipped more than 300 boxes because we've shipped a lot to our campus as well. Never lost a single one. Can you believe that? That is so great. Okay, and so still talking about restrictions there. Robin and I are not allowed to enter the Philippines at this time. We're hoping in the third quarter. They're saying possibly, depends on the COVID numbers, but just some few pictures of what's happened since. We've been from the middle or the beginning of March last year until the end of June last year, no churches were able to meet. Can you believe that? Now, some of the house churches, they never stopped. But anyway, this is a picture from July, first week of July. That's our main campus building, and the church that meets in the campus auditorium there. Their first meeting in July, or it may have been late June. But anyway, a number of baptisms have been, I've told them, since we're not allowed to have face-to-face classes, I said, I'm going to handle all the online module learnings. You guys concentrate almost solely on baptisms. And so guess what? Since July of last year, we have had about 130 baptisms just since July of last year. And all these pictures that you're looking at now have just been since July or even August of last year. It took them a little while to get going after some of the church restrictions were lifted, but about 130 baptisms since that time. And I'm so proud of this team. They are really taking seriously their work. They were worried, of course, that since we weren't allowed to have classes for a year, they would say to me, well, brother, do we still have our salary? And I said, yes, you still have your salary, but I want you to give your time to evangelism. And boy, they have really, really done it. And I'm really proud of these guys. These last few pictures you're looking at here are near our campus. And I've been assured that many of these are going to be future students of Laity Christian College. That's the school, LCC. Laity Christian College. We also call ourselves Life Changing Campus. That's because one of the guys graduated a number of years ago. He said, brother, this place changed my life. And so we call ourselves Life Changing Campus as well. Our kids are also about doing other things. Here they've made about 2,000 masks and given them to the neighbors. You know, those poor people over there that can't buy a mask, some of our kids make them. Some lady, and I couldn't tell you where, in a church here in Texas, donated tons of material. And so they took that material and made masks out of it. And here you see our latest project, a church building going up in Alcantara, Cebu, near where we live. We've got a thriving church there that's been meeting in a house for about 4 years now, and we're trying to put up a church building for them. So training up the hearts and minds of young people. Again, thank you for your generous support. We do appreciate it. As I said, my first time here, and I'm honored to be here. I did visit here back in the late 80s, I guess, one time, and it seems like this is different from, I think y'all have remodeled. I know you have a different preacher. You probably weren't even born then, but anyway, a preacher, if I remember correctly, a guy named Ray Hunter. Was that your preacher back in the day? Okay, all right. Well, again, thank you very much for allowing me to be here, and thank you for your help. And I'd like for you to friend me on Facebook. There's my name. I'm Johnny, LCC. You remember what LCC is? Life-changing campus. Yeah, I post generally nothing but school-related stuff here or work-related. So you can. I'm going to go back to that in case somebody. I want you to take your phone out right now and friend me. I'm going to wait. No, I'm kidding. I'm kidding. But seriously, you can learn a lot more about the work if you do that. Okay. Thank you again. Thank you again. All right. So, Brother Marvin asked me to extend the invitation. Is that what I... Okay. Okay, so I'm going to put this away. Maybe you heard the bad news out of Atlanta the other day, how 8 people were gunned down, 6 of them Asian Americans. And I read something last night on the internet about how, they're going to start this organization, and it's going to be called Asian Lives Matter. Following after the Black Lives Matter thing and organization. And, and you see a lot of people posting things about that, or perhaps Blue Lives Matter, And I've seen people, push back against that, and they say all lives matter. And, of course, we're not going to judge people and their motives for that, but of course Black Lives Matter. Of course they do. Blue Lives Matter. Of course they do. All lives matter, and they've always mattered. They've always mattered, even 2,000 years ago. Lives have always mattered. Now, there's always been evil men of all colors, of all races, of all creeds, of all beliefs, who don't believe that all lives matter, but all lives do matter. But I'm going to tell you something else, and it may surprise you. There's something that matters more than lives. There's something that matters more than lives, and I'm passionate about abortion. And I believe abortion is a terrible sickness of our country. Abortion is still outlawed in the Philippines. Thank God for that. But as bad as it is, there's something more important than all lives matter. Souls matter. Souls matter, and I want to tell you, that's really the reason I'm here. That's when you cut right down to it. That's the reason I'm here. That's why I've given 25 years of my life in the Philippines. I'd rather live here. I'm a Texan. I love Texas. I love Mexican food. Can't get any of that in the Philippines. They don't like spicy food over there, believe it or not. Can't watch the Dallas Cowboys over there. And that hurts. I'd rather live here. But I live in the Philippines and I work in the Philippines because souls matter. That's the most important thing. And I'd like for you to consider tonight being about your Father's business. As I said, I'd like for you to help us feed the poor and the hungry in the Philippines. I'd like for you to help us save souls and train preachers over there. That'd be great. But more importantly, it's for you to be about your Father's business in whatever way that might involve. There's too much at stake. An eternity is at stake. And I know you've heard the song Amazing Grace, one of the most famous hymns ever written by a fellow named John Newton about 300 years ago. But you remember how that last verse goes? When we've been there 10,000 years, bright shining as the sun, we've no less days to sing God's praise than when we first begun. You think about that, 10,000 years, that's a long time. It'll give you such a crick in the neck, as the genie said. Well, thank you. I got at least one laugh from that. But the song is correct. When we've been there 10,000 years, we've still got the same number of days ahead of us. So guess what? Whatever I have to do to make sure I get there, that's what I'm going to do. And I'm willing to give up the Dallas Cowboys. I'm going to confess to you that I used to be a person so absorbed in sports. I could tell you batting averages from guys that played with Babe Ruth, you know. Sports. That was it. But, you know, 1 Corinthians chapter 13, verse 11, the great love chapter, isn't it? 1 Corinthians 13. In verse 11, Paul said, when I was a child, I spoke as a child. I thought as a child. I reasoned as a child. But when I became a man, I put away childish things. And I want to put those childish things away. As much as I love the Dallas Cowboys, as much as I love Mexican food, I'm willing to give it up so that I can be about my Father's business, so that I can be there for that 10,000 years, bright shining as the sun. Being about the Father's business. Are you about the Father's business? If not, then if you realize that there's a deficiency in your life and in your heart, more importantly, you can get right with God tonight. Maybe that's the most important thing you can ever do in your life. Not maybe. Is get right with God. Is thy heart right with God? That's what the song asks. So if there's any way we can help you, if you'd like to have the prayers of the saints gathered here, prayer is a powerful thing. I love how James 5 verse 16 puts it in the King James Version. It's so beautifully poetic. The effectual, fervent prayer of a righteous man availeth much. Boy, that's so beautiful, isn't it? But you can boil that down to two words. Prayer works. If we can pray for you, we want to do that. Or if you'd like to obey the gospel, become a member of the New Testament church. It's real simple. Talked about it before. Come forward, confess your faith in Jesus Christ as the Son of God. Be immersed in water for the forgiveness of your sins. And God says He'll add you to His church. Not the church of a man, but to His church. So can we help you in any way? If we can, make your need known right now while we sing.